Welcome everybody to Sessions. This is a weekly event that we host here at Keystone, the beginning of the Innovation District. Super excited to have this conversation today. This is normally our Venture Chat space. And so we're going to continue on with that tradition. Today is a Venture Chat, but you're going to just chat with the director of Venture for America instead of a fellow today. And we really want to get into just the focus around human-centered design. And couldn't be lucky enough but to have this brother right next to me, Brother Naheem, who has really taken that concept and really just the I guess like the subtitle of this is how do we apply this concept to innovation and how innovation cannot happen without social inclusion, right? And so again, thank you everybody for coming to this great session. I think it's going to be great. My name is Craig Moore, and I don't like introducing people. I'm gonna say this all the time because I feel like people do well at making sure that all the points get told about themselves that they want to be told. So without further ado, Brother Naheem, if you don't mind giving us an introduction of yourself.
Mic check, mic check. We good? You can hear me now? Wow, it's amazing to be here. My name is Naeem Alameen, and really want to say thank you, Craig, for inviting me out this evening. This environment of deference that you and Kevin been able to create for Keystone Innovations is really an amazing platform to develop those relationships, systems of inclusion, and be able to do next steps with people, which is very important. So thank you. And so in terms of myself, founder and CEO of Swag Inc., I'm on the board of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion for Big Brothers and Big Sisters. I'm a writer, I'm a mentor, but something that I've been most of my life is a returning citizen, or someone who has experienced a prison sentence and returned to the community. And with that said, I've been impacted by mass incarceration over 30 years, and being someone who has had their narrative controlled, been managed by a system, and being able to break that through the vehicle of entrepreneurship, right, and ownership, and social entrepreneurship rather, which I like to speak to.
Yeah, and so when we're thinking about human-centered design, and today our focal point is going to be the design of humans within the justice system, right? And how this system, and any of you all who have ever taken the RAI training, if you have not taken it, please take the RAI training. We actually have a session coming up is it in the fall? Yep, coming in the fall. So stay tuned for that. But when you think about systems, and we're talking about the impact of the system, so I guess the best what's the word that I'm looking for? The best visual of how systems work, right? When you think about a lake, right, with fish in it, and the groundwater, when you take out fish in this toxic lake and you curate them and you make them feel better, you get them on a good status, and then you put them back inside that toxic lake, what happens to that fish? That fish re-enters into the system that it was already in, and it becomes just as toxic as it was before you pulled it out. And so you really have to understand that as you're rehabbing people, or as you're trying to take people through this system, are you creating a solution for the fish? Are you creating a solution for the lake? Or are you creating a solution for the groundwater, right? And is that groundwater going to support, and to me, if you're attacking the groundwater, you're now cleansing the lake, which will now eventually cleanse the fish. So in this term, the fish are returning citizens, right? The lake is all the support systems that comes around it that systematically, in some sense, might make sense when it comes to government, might make sense when it comes financially, but doesn't make sense for the fish itself, who now has to re-enter to this lake and possibly can swim for the ocean, but who knows, right? So I would love it if you can dig deep into Swag Inc., the inception of it, how you came up with it, a little bit about your story, and what it is that you're doing to be a groundwater solution.
Wow, so really great, Craig. I appreciate that. And so for me, I'm someone, as I said, been impacted by mass incarceration over 30 years. And what I've come to learn, as you said, in terms of environments, is that sometimes these environments create situations that are not conducive and that you can have, adverse outcomes. And so what did that look like for me? I was born in Junction City, Kansas. I enjoyed my nucleus family up until I was about 7 years old. Everything that I experienced was wholesome, and it revolved around safety and security. Me and my siblings, we were buffered from my mom's dysfunction of alcoholism, prostitution, and addiction to drugs. Like, we didn't experience any of those adverse interactions with her. We didn't know anything about it. We just knew that one day we were all on a plane going to Los Angeles, California to be placed in foster homes, and that we would be split up, right? And as I entered the foster care system, one of the things that I experienced was being approached by a gang, right? And they said to me, "Hey, we know that you just moved into this foster home. Do you know who your father is?" I said, "No, I don't." They said, "Well, you're gonna have to commit a robbery or you can't live here. Take this gun and bring us what you get or don't come back," right? And so I attempted to do that. I was scared, I failed miserably. I was arrested, processed, and booked, fingerprinted, and I sat in the cell with grown men, right? When this happened to me, it was in 1987, I was 8 years old. And that's when I would be introduced to the criminal justice system and stigmatized, right? And be, as I like to use the symbolism of a 10-rung ladder to allude to upward social mobility. And then, so getting to know me better, you have to travel up the rungs of dysfunction, trauma, poverty, systemic racism, and environments. And so my timeline, it follows as thus. I was arrested at 8 years old. The first time that I would see someone murdered would be at 9 years old. The first time that I would take a drink would also be at 9 years old. When I was 10 would be the time that I would start running away as I was being sexually molested by my foster parents and the other boys in the group homes. And at 12, I joined one of the largest gangs in Los Angeles, California, in the rolling 60s neighborhood Crips, to have some semblance of family protection and to be able to take care of myself, right? And so I would find myself approximately 1992 experiencing my first of many birthdays incarcerated. And so at 13, I was incarcerated, 18, 21, and 35, and 40 being a returning citizen, if that makes sense. And so in terms of like how we grew to come to Swag Inc., it's a really interesting journey. And so it follows a trajectory through foster care, gang life, and prison, right? And so, but also there has been moments where I have tried to ascend up that ladder only to slip right back down, right? And so after my first prison experience, I was 18 years old, and I got out of prison, I was approximately 20. And I went back to Los Angeles, California, as I was incarcerated in Virginia at that time. And I started back selling drugs, gang banging, and I would ultimately lose one of my friends, and I would, believe that that would be by my fault. I put them in a position and they lost their life ultimately. And so it's something that bothered me, then and now. However, I decided to leave and I came back to where I was born, the Midwest. But I didn't come really looking for opportunity. I just was looking for a new environment, right? Because where I was from, I grew up in the land of protests, the introduction of crack cocaine, the beginning of the Crip and Blood War, the social unrest. O.J. Simpson drove right past my house. All of the urban films that you see in terms of black experiences were filmed in my community in the Crenshaw district, right? And so having these robust experiences, I wanted to, get into a new environment. So I came back to Kansas, and I would be arrested shortly thereafter for possession of marijuana. I had 21 grams of weed. This was in 2001, right? And I received a 4-year prison sentence, and I served 3.5. But this is where I did my self-introspection as I wanted to show up for my life, and I felt like that I have something more to offer than being, a drug dealer, a gangbanger, and someone who was living lawlessly, especially when I didn't feel like I was designed to do that. And I would have those successes. I'll be released back in 2004. I would graduate from Kansas State University with 3 degrees, a Bachelor's of Science in Sociology, a BS in Criminology, and an AS in Psychology. And I had a dynamic experience at K-State. We got any K-Staters in the house? There we go. We got that alumni.
There's always one.
We love it. And so when I was there, I joined student government. I became a senator, a chief tribunal, assistant attorney general, president of the criminology club. I'm applying for law school. I'm hitting the dean's list. I have 4.0s. And this is from a non-traditional student fresh out of prison. But one thing I did while I was incarcerated was to educate myself or become autodidactic. But that wouldn't hold up in front of employers, right? I went 0 for 200 from 2010 to 2013. No employer would hire me. The only thing that they referred to was my felony conviction for marijuana, right? That's what made me not a good fit. Not the 3 degrees, not the experience that I had, not the relationship I was looking to develop in the interview. None of that mattered, right? It was just no. And so after a while, so for me, the first rule of nature is self-preservation, right? And it's something that we have to do. And I want to do that in a pro-social way. And the decision I made forced me to go back to an indulgent time where I took more than I gave, right? In terms of deciding to enter back into the drug game. But the way that would happen for me, I was just graduating from K-State. I was still working at the Kansas State Student Union at night as a janitor, and I was working for Allied Moving Company as a mover in the morning, and in the interim, I was looking for career opportunities. And one day, my former parole officer, who was no longer my parole officer as I had discharged probation and parole successfully and graduated college, called my employer and told them of my criminal history. And that's something I didn't do. And so my employer, he fired me immediately, right? For not, being forthcoming with that information. And that would be the day that I picked up the phone and I made a call to a friend to start back selling drugs, right? And so 2013 is a very special year for me. And in fact, it's so special, I recently got a tattoo on my face. I'm not a big face tattoo person, but I got this one on my face as it emulates someone that is special to me, and it's an S, and it's emblematical of a conversation that we had about legacy. And as I'm talking to Nipsey Hussle about who he's going to sign his major contract with, in terms of Rick Ross or another label, he says to me, for me, cuz, it's about being patient. I know the moment that I sign that contract, my life changes forever. It's about ownership, it's about creating a long-term plan, and it's about elevating the status of the people around you, right? And I was able to see him leverage that conversation when I was in prison right after it for a 5-year prison sentence for a crime I didn't commit. Remember when I said I was selling drugs as a way to self-preservate? Well, I was under investigation, right? But I wasn't the target. My friend was. And the detectives, they arrested me, and they said to me, we have you on 7 felonies. Your bond is $150,000. Your charge is conspiracy to distribute cocaine. But we don't want you. We want your God here. We got him in 3 states, and we need you to tie it in. I said, I don't know anything about it, and I can't help you. And he said, well, if you don't work for me, then you're going to take these charges on the chin. And I said, well, I guess I'll be taking them on the chin then. And he pulled out a tape recorder, he pressed stop, and he pulled off his hat, which was a wig attached to it, and he walked out the door. And I would receive, after they dropped the charges against my friend, I would receive a 68-month prison sentence, right? Someone that was looking to start a career opportunity, recently graduated college, haven't been in any trouble in 12 years, right? I got out of prison in 2004, graduated 2010. This happened in 2014 kind of thing. So it had been a substantial amount of time in the interim. And as I fought my case over a year, I would get accepted to the University of Kansas master's program for public administration. I would ultimately get a job working for General Dynamics, doing student loans, and I didn't have any impact for a year. And as I went to court, my lawyer at the meeting before my sentencing meeting, he said to me, Naeem, here's the situation. either you sign this for 5 years or we turn it over to the feds and you get upwards to 20. But you have to make your decision right now. So my question is to you, what would you do? What I did, I signed that paper. You hear me? Because I've seen a lot of my friends, a lot of my family members get washed away by trying to fight their case and be standing on just cause, and the system fail. Over sentence them, they die in prison, right? And all of these tragedies. And I didn't want to be a part of that. So I took the 5. And I got an opportunity to see Nipsey Hussle leverage that conversation that we had in our community as he was creating entrepreneurial ecosystems, investing in businesses, investing in real estate, leveraging his celebrityness for the people around him. And I said, oh, what I need to do is write a business plan, right? And so that in hopes he would invest. And as I'm serving this 5-year sentence in Lansing Correctional Facility, 2014, 2018 kind of thing, I was there. I said, well, what can you do? What have you ever done, right? You have this degree work, you have these experiences. And I said, well, what has impacted you the most? I said, getting out of prison and coming right back. We'll solve for that. And I didn't know it at the time, but I would be using the 5 principles to design thinking in terms of social entrepreneurship. Empathy, ideate, prototype, define, and test in terms of looking to create purpose and profitability to solve for people's pain points. So again, purpose and profitability to solve for people's pain points. Empathy, ideate, prototype, define, and test. And so for me, the empathy was talking to men in a space that is segregational about intimate experiences that they're having in and out of prison. Like, that never happens, right? But because I was able to express the work that I wanted to do that impacted us all, I was able to take that feedback and incorporate it in my business model. And the number one thing that came up was, if I only had a job before I was released, then I believe I'll be successful. I wouldn't have probation violations. I wouldn't have bad interactions with people. I wouldn't start selling drugs or looking to go deal drugs. I believe that I could be successful. In terms of ideate, right? What are you going to do and how are you going to do it, right? Well, I'm gonna create a new business model in the mass incarceration space. Well, if you're gonna do that, what is that prototype? It's pre-entry planning. We're gonna work with our clients 1 year before they are released, and then we're gonna help them discharge probation and parole 1 to 3 years in the community as a way to disrupt mass incarceration. Well, define it. Swag Inc. Serve, witness, and give guidance. Inspiration never ceases. The test, March 22nd, 2018, being released homeless, geographically displaced, and without any resources or money, with my parole officer committing 5 administrative errors that led to a system of homelessness, one in which I almost took my life, considered taking my life. I've been in some tough spots. I ain't never thought about taking my life until I was sleeping in an abandoned car in the back of a building, having all of the life experiences around it, right? Being separated from my family, not having any status, not any ownership, not any control, because no one did a pre-entry plan for me. The re-entry department, they didn't show up for me. My parole officer didn't show up for me. I got released homeless in lieu of a support system, right? And so, one of the things that I realized was that in our value system at Swag Inc., we have a couple different definitions to ownership. And so ownership from a sociological perspective it's really about showing up, doing what you say you're gonna do, and having a big heart, right? That's that from a sociological perspective. From an economical perspective, it's about creating new systems of revenue that create purpose and profitability and elevate the status of the people around us and restore our community, right? And so that's what allowed me to weather that storm. And I had an example in Nipsey Hussle that I was working my way towards, as I knew that I could have another 20-minute hour conversation with him. And so as I got further along into my release, I was given an opportunity at UPS. I was hired as a unloader. Within 4 months, I was promoted to human resources. And at the same time, I was transversing through the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and so I had a working business plan. I submitted that to the C-suite. They saw value in that, allowed me to work autonomously, co-brand UPS and Swag Inc., and focus my hiring initiatives on people that had been impacted like I had. And that led to a partnership with the probation and parole of KC Mo. And I was able to increase attendance by 50%, increase retention by 70%, and zero recidivism amongst our clients, right? And this was from 2018 to 2019, as I was simultaneously working as a career development executive for the Full Employment Council. So on one end, I was a job developer. On the other end, I was a decision maker in terms of a hiring manager.
So first of all, wow. Can we get a little hand claps? To me, there are so many points of innovation, right? There are so many points of pivots, and what I feel like is really thrive within our culture is resiliency, right? And so be able to the opportunity to be able to push past those pain points to be able to go forward. So if you can, give us an example of how you've taken your own experiences and actually transfer them into actionable program steps that yield results, that yield the impact that you have, and break that down on how you feel like that is, in a sense, kind of innovating the systems that we're currently in. Because and the thing that's popping in my head right now is not only were you able to do that for UPS, but now you're doing that for J.E. Dunn. You're doing that for Big Brothers and Big Sisters. So what are those consistent points that you're able to bring to these corporations to me, historically would not look at reentry talent to come in, but with your support, you're able to provide them that value add in doing so?
Wow, terrific question. And so that's going to pertain to diversity, equity, inclusion for returning citizens, and really redefining what that looks like. And so the business model, it takes a collaboration between the Department of Corrections, the entrepreneurial ecosystem, and the business community, and a nonprofit where where retention reduces recidivism, right? And so when we're operating from that precipice, the business model that I introduced allowed me to become a disruptor, right? An unreasonable business model, leading to untraditional business arrangements, and also mentorship in decoding that sacred language into interpreting and understanding the fiduciaries to receive funding and establish relationships in that kind of way. And so when I was working for example, J.E. Dunn Construction, right? The opportunity and the challenge there when you have a nonprofit that's promoting ownership for people impacted by mass incarceration, and then you have a construction company who's perceived as ranking low on the DEI and also community impact and the work that they do in the prison industrial complex, which is that lake that you were referring to, right? And all those parts around that. Well, that's just that. We have the opportunity to elevate the status of people in positions of power to do something about it. And so what does that look like now? We are creating market value assets in the construction craftsman trades, and we're providing opportunity to employment with a construction company before you release, right? And so in terms of our relationship with Big Brothers and Big Sisters, right? We have Michael Lawrence, the CEO, and he was impressed with the design that I had in terms of our revenue generate model, our sustainability. And so Swag Inc. is a 501c3 tax exempt entity. However, the feasibility in that relies on fundings, grants, donations, and it's really not a lot of ownership in that. And so through some other nefarious experiences with foundations, it inspired me to create a revenue generating model, leveraging my experiences in UPS, the Full Employment Council, receiving my master's degree in human resource management that UPS paid for, and looking at how we can get compensated for connection in our clients, creating that purpose and profitability. And so the first step in that was not acting as a traditional staffing company and hitting our clients' pocket, or being like work release in the Department of Correction and charging them 25% of their paycheck for room and board, right? We transfer the cost to the employer. And then we found another unique way to garner that support from the employer, and also look at developing relationships with employers that have foundations attached to them, right? So we can leverage that tax exempt status, and then we can go create new money.
When you think about diversity, equity, inclusion, most of us are to me, I think of race, I think of sexuality, I think of all those things. But when, in your sense, you're talking about it from a returning citizen, right? So if you don't mind, like diving deep into how that, to me, was that innovative thought process to bring that into that space. What is that? How do you, not so much how do you pitch it, but like what is it? Like how do you create the those citizens into this same scope of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Wow. So really, what's great about Kansas City is the access and the accessibility of people, and the low to the groundness that it has around it. And so as I developed this business model, as again, operating in those different spaces for the last 4.5 years, I've met a lot of people, from the lowest reptile to the highest seraph, if you will. And so in doing so, what we've been able to express is diversity, equity, inclusions for returning citizens that sound like this. So diversity is developing relationships so our clients can transition back into the community as stakeholders. Equity is creating market value assets that allow our clients to be portable amongst industries and to have that ownership. And then inclusion, that becomes promoting ownership for people impacted by mass incarceration, and then again, elevating the status of people in positions of power to do something about it. And that's a really terrific question, because the way that I got to that definition of diversity, equity, inclusion, if I'm gonna be all the way remiss, is in my experiences when I was on set for the filming of Baby Boy. Are you familiar with that film, Baby Boy?
Yes, I am.
Have we seen Baby Boy? Baby Boy? All right, so Baby Boy is a movie written, produced, and directed by John Singleton, R.I.P. John Singleton. And it's about a African-American man, our boy, that's lost looking for his manhood, and he's caught up in the streets kind of thing. And this movie was filmed in my community, but it was after many. And so it just so happens when this movie was filmed, so I, again, grew up in the Rolling 60s, from Rolling 60s, right? One of my big homies was Snoop Dogg's manager, and he used to always come over to our spot, Snoop Dogg and his whole crew. And we would smoke weed, listen to music, and talk about other things. And so they were like, we want to film Baby Boy in the Crenshaw district. And so Big D told him, he said, well, you're gonna have to tell John, if he does this, then he's gonna have to include the people in this community, right? That he can't include any extras, right? And so that becomes that diverse part, the equity. You're gonna have to give us action at that $16 million budget, John, right? And so our community, whose stories that you're expressing, can have ownership in that. And then the inclusion, putting us in spaces with directors, photographers, grippers, whatever, that whole environment. But people that are from our community and not these extras, or you can't film this movie here. And so John conceded, excuse me, and that's how I was able to get in a scene with Snoop Dogg in Baby Boy back in 2000 or so.
Okay, so let's talk about perspective for a second, right? So for me, outside looking in, I'm like, dang, they just strong-armed this man to shoot a movie in his neighborhood. But in a sense, and that perspective only becomes because, to me, essentially, the system that you're talking about is a gang environment, right? And so the big homie, i.e. being the leader of the gang, is the one who's putting these stipulations down. But because of the perception of gang, is not looked at as a business opportunity, but it's looked at as a strong arm. But essentially, he actually created diversity, equity, inclusion within his culture. And I just want to break that down for anybody who was thinking that and didn't land on that. But you honestly, when we're thinking about human design, you also have to think about perspective, right? What is the perspective that I'm looking to or looking towards when it comes to the community that I want to serve, and reverse back the community that I'm serving. What are the perspectives that they are receiving or they're being hindered by, to be able to, and I don't have a question after this. I'm just trying to come to my own my own great thought after that. But that is dope. Like that and being able to have that leverage, and not so much in an intimidating way, but in so of we're trying to take care of our own. We're trying to make sure that our own is represented and our own is seen. And Baby Boy is probably one of my favorite movies ever, and never would have known that it wasn't just extras in there. But I mean, it's a little bit of C-list acting in there too, so I'm not gonna go deep in that. But yeah, I'm just,
right.
Well, yeah, that's dope. That's dope,
man. Thank you for that robust observation and expression. And so, the movie is filled with my friends, and unfortunately, you won't see me in it because my scene was edited. I didn't make the director's cut, and I'm really upset about that because I told everyone that I knew. I told everyone I'm in Baby Boy. So look, and this is what it looked like. We went up to Silver Brand. It is a old former women's prison in Los Angeles, in the Valley or so. And we went on set, and we were in this trailer with Snoop Dogg. We listened to music, we're smoking weed, we're chilling, and then we go to do our scene. And I was in the historic jail scene, the one in which he's calling home on the phone, calling baby. And so we're in the jail movement line, and I'm looking at Snoop, and John Singleton comes out on like a four-wheeler. He's about, I don't know, 50 feet away. And then this big crane with a camera extends, and it drops right on my face as I'm the first one in line. And so we make our line movement. John was dissatisfied with the first one. He expressed it. He said, he said, and this is what he said, because he knew what it is. He said, y'all done been to jail before, move like you mad. And so that's what we did the second time. And when we went back to Snoop's trailer, Snoop said to me, he said, Lil Debo, come here, come to the back with me. And so I went to the back with him. He said, hand me that duffel bag. I picked it up, I handed him the black duffel bag. He opened it up. It was about 5 pounds of weed in it. And he said, this is the least best, and this is the very best. Which one do you want, cuz? I said, Snoop, give me the best. He said, no, I'm gonna give you the least. It's a process, I gotta walk you up the ladder, right? And so it taught me a valuable lesson about appreciation, right? And the process in that.
Yeah, love that. Again, perception, it means everything. And I think that as we are all in this space of innovation, perception always must be at the forefront, right? What is it, and we talk about this a lot in the Medici effect as well. What is it that is outside of the concepts that I've learned, the concepts that I've lived, that is going to allow me to create something new, that's going to allow me to create something that's inclusive and ultimately innovate to be able to change the world. So tell us as we're coming to a close. Oh no, oh gosh, okay. As we're not coming to a close, as we're going to the second part of this. So tell me what's next for Swag Inc. and how do you see it actually changing that groundwater and lake systems that we're in right now?
Absolutely. So Swag Inc. And so what do? And so we do 3 things. And that is never go in, never go back, and we help employers change the way they recruit. And so in terms of never go in, we are in the process of creating amazing after-school programs with our partners at Startland KC. Shout out to Veronica Alberta. She's also on the board of directors for Swag Inc. We're creating pipelines to careers, for example, with J.E. Dunn Construction, bringing in the entrepreneurial ecosystem to turn these students' hustles into businesses. We're bringing in the mental health team at Sam Rogers, doing innovative things around trauma-informed care. The coding, we're bringing in coding pieces as well. And all of this is to support KCPS in its after-school program, right? Because there's none there now. And we've been working on this for the last year. So I'm really excited that we're almost to that fruition point. In terms of what we're doing with the Department of Corrections, we're doing our programs and services at Transitional Center of Kansas City. And so we're looking to really continue to grow in that work, with connecting with employers, grow with connecting with volunteers, and spreading the idea of Swag Inc., but also diversity, equity, inclusion for returning citizens.
So as we're thinking about our evolving workforce and this is, I'm about to like put in a little bit of plug of like my passion, right? So in 2017, I believe Forbes came out with an article that said in 2053, the wealth medium of the black household will go down to zero, and that has exponentially accelerated due to the evolution of the workforce response to COVID-19. Right, so everything's now being automated. If you haven't realized it now, when you go through McDonald's, as often as I don't like to talk about it, when you go through McDonald's, you're not talking to a real person no more. You're now talking to an AI robot, right? And so as we're thinking about, but the thing is, it's not going to necessarily get rid of jobs. It's going to evolve jobs, and it's actually going to grow the number of jobs. So it's about 83 million jobs that are going to be impacted, and it's going to grow to about 94 million jobs. And there is this skilled up gap that has to be filled in a matter of years. And so when you think about the work that you're doing, and we think about all these vacant jobs that are out there, these jobs that have become available, how do you see the work that you're doing helping fill that gap, not only for what the workforce needs, but also how it impacts the black community? Because even though the statistic is wrong where they say, there's more black men in jail than there is in college, is wrong, but we are the ones who are impacted the most from the smallest criminal activities, right? So how do you see the work that you're doing help create that balance when it comes to the workforce, but also helping increase the household income for black families?
Really great question. It's all about ownership. Right, and I'm someone that's been impacted by that very scenario that you just described in terms of being replaced by AI. And so I had a amazing career, 3-year career at UPS in human resources, and something very interesting happened. About a year before it happened, the leadership said that we're going to transform the HR department. It's going to be streamlined. It's going to be better. It's going to be this. They ain't tell us you ain't gonna be there. Right?
You're gonna train the robot that's gonna replace you.
Right. And so, I was faced with, a dilemma as my colleagues were, take the severance package or look for something else. It's kind of all those little different things. And so, while I was, really remorseful for their experience, I was excited that I had been developing in the role as the founder and CEO of Swag Inc. Right, because now I could create that ownership. And when we're talking about upskilling in that gap, that's very important because in my mind, or in my opinion rather, we're not in the great resignation. That's what it's been termed, this kind of thing that we're experiencing where we have an economy impacted by COVID-19. We have entrepreneurs, the gig economy, we have mass incarceration, and we have non-job seekers, right? And so now it becomes about ownership. And so what we're able to do in that piece in moving from, helping change the way employers recruit, moving from talent acquisition to talent sourcing. And so talent acquisition becomes a fractured model, right? In that traditional process of looking for opportunity. So now we have to go to where that talent is. Well, the only place I know where there's 1.9 million people at right now is the Department of Corrections, and that's a wealth of talent. Right, I was one of the people in that talent pool. I was incarcerated with 3 degrees, ready to go for a Swag Inc. Hopes program with a partnership with J. Dunn Construction to be upskilled in the construction craftsman trades, right? And so having those experiences, I lost my place. I lost it because I got lost in the thought, actually, of those. I was there for a minute. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. So I think the question that came up for me now is, if we do see the incarcerated as a new talent pool, right? How do you, for those who don't have a partnership with Swag Inc. yet, what are some tips that you can give these HR departments when it comes to understanding how to, one, make sure that you're because let me say this, the fear of doing it is a real fear in so many cases, but it is also a fear that has created a perception that's the case for everybody. So how do you create, I don't want to say a relaxed culture, but a more, I don't even want to say filtered culture, but how do they portray how do they get the results that you're getting with the incarcerated talent to be able to welcome into the workforce? I hope that's the question that God put down on me, but if it's not,
Right. Well, I would say that the HR team has to ask themselves a couple of questions. what are your biasness towards returning citizens? And also if those fears of criticism is stronger than those desires of success. And the only way to do that is really looking at incentives, right? What incentivizes one. But we really have to know like the root word to incentive, and that's incendiary, right? So you become incendiary around the things that motivate you, and you're in a position of power. And so from my experience in HR, one of the first barriers is the background checks, and those elements, they are crafted out by the employer. And so that's going to show you the mindset of that employer in terms of those background check elements. There's 12 of them, right? And then the next question, do they align with the position being expressed interest in? Does it align there? And, excuse me, one of the things that my mentor, Michael Lawrence at Big Brothers Big Sisters communicated to me, he said, when you don't have, we don't have diversity, equity, inclusion in your workforce. The only way to get there is through growth, right? And it can't be referrals, right? Because you're gonna get the same thing, a cookie cutter model. So it has to be through growth. And so having that mindset to openness and being able to scan the environment for places of growth is really huge.
Awesome. All right, I want to open up the floor to any questions. Anybody have any questions for myself or Naeem around the subject?
I got a question.
Awesome. Let's hear it, Kevin.
But where do you want to be with Swag Inc. in like 5 years and 10 years? Like, where's your vision for where this goes?
It's a really great question. And so the vision is to get recidivism to a functional zero. What that means is that you're not going to prison unless you lack ownership. And again, I gave those two definitions of ownership, right? And so what Swag Inc. wants to do is be in 50 states, 50 prisons, exiting with swag, where we're really impacting the community, the business community, the entrepreneurial ecosystem. But what we're really doing is restoring lives and allowing people to heal from these experiences and to transition back as stakeholders and have value and have a voice. And so a relationship with the J.E. Dunn Construction becomes tantamount, right? Because they're in 24 offices. That's 24 states. That's half the map in one relationship, right? And so we like to dream big, and that's what we're going to continue to do. But a 5-year vision, Kevin, to your point, the 50 states, 50 prisons, that's about a 10-year vision. But the 5-year marker is having our own transition space, where we have a partnership with the Department of Corrections, but they have no influence, no staff, just a pipeline to receive, the talent that we want to connect with.
Love it. And how do you see? Sorry, now I want to dig into that 5-year plan. How do you see that working out when you go through the judicial system and they're not ready to you? Is it just the judge appoints them to your program, or what does that process look like?
It's a really great question. What we have going on in Kansas City, Missouri right now is very unique. And I think it's really only here in Kansas City, where you have a prison who shifted his mindset to a transitional center and now interviews and gleans by application and interview residents that'd be a good fit for a pre-entry model, right? In terms of having a holistic suite of services to help you transition back into the community. And it would be, advantageous. One of the things I misspoke. One of the advantageous things about COVID, because there were some for some people, unfortunately, kind of thing, was that it took our proof and concept in terms of working in the community, doing at-large connection, to connecting us with the Department of Corrections and pitching them over a year on a pre-entry model when they didn't know the identity that they wanted to take on. So it was really an educational advocacy tool for them to develop their approach. And then in 2021, we had a year-long community partners meeting with other organizations to work out the logistics of what that would look like. And now April 22, we went in doing our programs and services.
Man, that's beautiful.
Have you ever considered pairing with federal or state prosecutors in order to kind of ease this transition and facilitate the process a little bit more?
We have not, but that'd be a great place to start, as I know the prosecutor has the most power in the courtroom, right?
They do.
Thank you for that reminder.
So I have one question because I've actually like hired like a returning citizen before, and one thing that we've talked about was like mental illness, and he was dealing with a lot of self-doubt, and the fact that he was in jail for 20 years and then out of nowhere now he's like in an open space, and he was having some episodes. And one thing that I wanted to know is this something that you are providing to the people going into the workforce, or is this something that the employer will eventually have to deal with? Deal with is the wrong word, but basically, yes. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to know.
So very good question, and I appreciate you for giving someone an opportunity and then taking the extra step to be focused on their mental health. Like, that's really dope, and I can relate to his experiences. I think in like our spaces we call it imposter syndrome. But yeah, coming out for me, being a returning citizen, then trying to develop an organization, trying to find my way in the community, right? I don't know what's going on. And so then you break down, right, kind of thing. And so that was important. And it's a sweet spot of our programs and services. And so we have a partnership with Sam Rogers Behavioral that allows us to provide mental health, healthcare, which acts like stopgap coverage until our employment partners who don't have it kicks in. We can do that kind of thing, but also supportive services and food and clothing vouchers, and support in getting to those appointments through Uber rides. But we do that with our clients as they're incarcerated and as they are in the community. And it's something that I've benefited personally as well as I connected with a therapist.
All right. Well, that is the end of our session. We really appreciate everybody garnering their attention here.